continues today. Let's speak now to the Prime Minister, Theresa May. Good morning.
Good morning.
Wasn't not that long ago that you were campaigning to remain in Europe, and now listening to your speech, especially on Sunday, you sound as if you are positively relishing the prospect of Brexit. Have you changed your mind?
Well, yes, I did campaign to remain in the European Union, as did some of my colleagues sitting around the cabinet table. But crucially, that's in the past. The British people gave us their verdict. Their verdict was that they wanted to leave the European Union. It's the job now of the government that I lead to make sure that we go out and get the right deal for the UK. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And I think there are opportunities that will come to us as we leave the European Union. So this is about getting the negotiation right with the EU. But it's also about developing those trading relationships around the world. And I've seen some real interest from countries around the globe coming to the UK saying, we want to work with you, we want to trade with you, let's get some deals
So
going.
it's a land of opportunity, but that's quite different from the kinds of things that you were saying before the vote, of course. On Sunday, you talked about Britain being an opportunity to stand tall, to believe in ourselves, to forge an ambitious and optimistic role in the world. But none of that was spoken about in the event of Brexit before the referendum in June. I just wonder if you think that the UK now is better off in its position exiting from Europe with you in charge than perhaps we would be if we voted to stay in.
Well, if you remember, if you look back to the campaign, I also gave a speech in the campaign in which I said this was a balanced judgment that people would be making. I believed then that it was right to campaign to stay in the European Union, but I said I didn't think the sky would fall in if we came out of the European Union.
But you gave plenty of warnings of what may happen if we did leave that were pretty negative.
Well, I said that the sky wouldn't fall in if we left the European Union. Now, as I say, that's in the past. We are united as a government in delivering on what the British people have asked us to do. They want us to leave the European Union, and I think it's absolutely right that as we do that, we look to make the best of this opportunity. We look to ensure that what we're doing is getting the right deal with the European Union in terms of trade in goods and services, but that also we're opening up those new trading opportunities around the world.
Back in
so
April,
it's right.
if I can just
say, it's right to be positive about what we can do in the future. That's the government's job, is to deliver Brexit. It means Brexit, and we will make a success of it.
Back in April, he said, if we do vote to leave the European Union, we risk a loss of investors and businesses to remaining EU member states driven by discriminatory EU policies, and we risk going backwards when it comes to international trade. Are you as bleak in your outlook of our economic prospects now?
Well, I think what's interesting, since I've become Prime Minister, I've sat down with businesses, large and small, here in the UK. When I was in New York recently, I took the opportunity to sit down and talk with US investors, with companies, American companies providing jobs here in the UK. And what's interesting is the collective view that I get is that regardless of what people thought before the 23rd of June, they're now saying the British people have given their verdict. The UK government is going to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union. Let's look to see what opportunities we can bring together, what we can do for the future to ensure that continued investment, continued trade and continued jobs growth here in the UK. So there's a real feeling, a constructive feeling, a positive feeling of going out there and making sure that we're getting the right deal.
Okay, so scrap everything that was said before. This is the new reality. This is what we're facing, if you like. One of the very central issues in the whole referendum debate was, of course, immigration. And for a long time, your party has stuck to the idea, to the target of reducing net migration to the UK down to the tens of thousands. Now, that whole policy as a target or as an ambition has been slightly watered down in recent years. Can you just explain exactly where you stand on that at the moment and whether we are going to see a reduction in net migration and how long that will take?
Well, first of all, the policy hasn't been watered down. We still believe that should bring net migration down to sustainable levels. We think that means in the tens of thousands, so the policy hasn't changed in that sense. Of course, what has changed is that when we leave the European Union, we will be able to bring control into the movement of people from the EU into the United Kingdom, which is a part of the immigration system that we haven't been able to have control over in the past. But as an independent sovereign country, of course, we will be able to have that control.
So given that you've got that kind of flexibility now, can you tell us when you might meet that target?
Well, I think if you listen to any of the interviews that I've given on immigration over the 6 years that I was Home Secretary, and those that I've continued to give as Prime Minister, I've always made the point that in immigration you actually have to be constantly looking at the issue, you have to be constantly working to make sure that you're closing any loopholes that people might try to find in the system. And so that's what we continue to do, and continue to look at immigration from outside the European Union, as well as obviously looking at what will be the right opportunity, the right controls to bring in the future for movement from the EU.
But a lot of people, you'll understand, will have voted in favour of Brexit on the belief that this will have meant we had absolute control over our borders. So I wonder why it is you can't say then now, here is a point at which we will be able to say we will have reduced net migration to our target. Why can't you say that?
Well, first of all, on the issue of control, yes, people did want control for movement from the European Union into the UK. You're absolutely right about that. That's why we're very clear, and I'm very clear as Prime Minister, that one of the things we will deliver as we leave the European Union is to bring control into the movement of people from the EU into the UK. The point is, it will be for the British government to decide what that control is. It will be for the British government to decide what the rules will be for the movement of people coming from the EU into the UK. That's the point about control, and that was what people were saying to us on the 23rd of June. We want our government to make these decisions.
Okay, one of the big major policy announcements since you've become Prime Minister concerns the reintroduction of grammar schools. Now, I wonder on this one if you think that in some way you've slightly misjudged the mood here. When you look at the fact that teaching unions don't like it, when you hear the comments of the outgoing Ofsted head, Sir Michael Wilshaw, who said that the notion that this will benefit poor children is absolute tosh. When you look at the evidence of where grammar schools are introduced, like in Kent, for example, where they also have the highest number of underperforming schools in the country, do you still think this is the right way to pull up standards across the board?
What we're doing in our education policy is ensuring that we open up the system and have more good school places. We still have 1.25 million children in schools that are underperforming. We need to increase the number of good school places that are available in our education system, so that parents have the confidence that whichever type of school their child is going to, they're getting the good quality education that enables them to get on in life and to develop their
and that
talents
means grammar
and go as
schools.
far
You
as
stand by
goes.
the grammar
Well,
school.
yes, I'm just going to, because you focus on grammar schools, but actually the policy was about more than grammar schools. What the policy is about is increasing the capacity of the system. It's about more good school places. It's about universities working with schools to improve education. It's about the independent sector supporting the state sector. It's about opening up new faith schools. And yes, it's about saying that the ban that we currently have, there is a law that says you cannot open a new grammar school. I think most people would say, given that grammar schools are overwhelmingly good or outstanding schools, that within grammar schools, poorer children do better than they do in other schools. That's what we see from the lack of attainment gap in grammar schools. That's important. Parents value the quality of education their children get. And that's why we're opening up the system.
Apologies for the interruptions, because time is always so limited on these occasions and there's so much to get through. Let me ask you about one of the major stories of the day, which is increasing the number of doctors. The BMA told us this morning that doctors are demoralised, alienated and exhausted, and this announcement of 1,500 new homegrown doctors a year does nothing to address that urgent problem. Are you going to do anything to address that?
Well, first of all, I think the announcement we're making on doctors this morning is a very important one. It's an important one for two reasons. First of all, there will be people here in the UK who want to train as doctors who've not been able to do so because of the limits on places. But secondly, I think people will want to see more British doctors in the NHS. I think it's important. The NHS is bringing in doctors from overseas. I think people have rightly asked the question, why don't we see more people being trained here in the UK? And that's exactly what we're going to do for the future.
Does it matter where your doctor comes from then?
I think this is good news for doctors. I think this is good news for the NHS. And I think, a lot of hospitals spend a lot of money on bringing in agency staff, many of whom are coming in from overseas. Actually, if we have more doctors trained in Britain, that will be a benefit to the NHS.
Thank you very much, Theresa May, Prime Minister there, and your reaction to that, in particular to the major story of the day,